Ujjawal, hi, good to have you with us. How have you been?
Hey Ashu, really glad to be here, man, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to come here. I'm very well, kind of high on the festive season. How about you guys?
Totally. I think I'm with you, right? And I think this festive season possibly looks like a breather. Right. I think with what we've been through in the last little over a year, I
Yeah,
think it's been a very difficult phase for I think each one of us. I think businesses have gone through a very difficult cycle, right? And I think this is a festive season which looks promising, right? And I think there is a huge pent up demand, right? And I think everybody's now sort of raring to go, right, and raring to consume. I think which is an extremely positive sentiment, and I think this conversation thus becomes very important, right? In line
yeah,
with what we're going to possibly experience, right? Um, Ujjwal, this is an important conversation, right? I think what you're doing is, I am particularly excited about it. I mean, which is usually the case with all my conversations, right? But here you're challenging some of the largest players, right? When it comes to, the sportswear industry, right? Right. And this, it becomes very important. And plus, there's a huge made in India focus that you have. You're catering to an audience, right? A maturing audience, a demanding audience, right? And you're building a direct relationship, right? Something that a lot of traditional brands have not been able to do, right? So you're kind of reinventing this category and by doing many things differently, many new things, right? And thus, like I said, this becomes an interesting conversation in that sense.
absolutely, Ashu. Very, very excited to have this conversation. And you're right, the category itself is, I would say, one of the hottest category, not just in India. India is definitely special, but globally across the
Right.
world, athleisure, activewear, performance wear. And we take a lot of pride in being at the forefront of innovation in this category. So yeah, very, very interesting.
Interesting. Ujjwal, before we dive into the Zymrat conversation, right? I'd love you to take us through your journey. You've been there, you've done quite a few things, right? I think it'll be a great starting point talking about a little bit of that, and then moving into Zymrat.
Yeah, thank you, Ashu. So, I've been self-employed. I would say. I mean, of course, now we in the last few years we started calling it as an entrepreneur.
Right.
But when I started, we just used to call it, okay, I'm running a business or I'm self-employed. So I've been self-employed for quite some time. So I
Right.
think I just worked full time, like 9 to 5, for a couple of years with an IT giant in India and for some time in UK.
Right.
But since 2010, I've been self-employed. I've been working with many companies from across the world. So primarily what I used to do in the early stage of my career was that, I've been a tech guy all my life. So me and my co-founder then in one of the tech startups, we used to write code. We used to
Right.
build websites. We used to do
Uh-huh.
a lot of heavy lifting in the back end for companies from across the world.
Right.
I would say we have also worked with some YC funded startups, some Fortune 500,000 companies, even IT giants like Infosys have been our clients
Right.
across years, right? So that was the time I would say, which allowed me to build a corpus to kind of become more independent and do things
Right.
that I really wanted to do. But there was one more thing which was very funny and very interesting, which happened and which kind of led me to Zymrat, right? So now imagine a guy in his mid early 20s living in Bangalore, earning in US dollars, right? I
Right.
mean, it makes a lot of difference, right? And Bangalore being famous for being a watering hole.
Right.
Of course, I used to do a lot of, I would say, partying around, kind of eating, drinking, so many things came with it, right? But that led to a massive amount of weight gain for me as an individual. So there was a point of time when I became almost 100 kilos, and I'm a 5'8" guy. So 5'8", 100 kilos, you can
Right.
imagine, it's massive, right? But apart from the looks and the impact that it has on an individual, in physical appearance, health
Right.
was one of the factors which was kind of really shaking me up from within. So one fine day, I just woke up and looked at myself in the mirror and realized, okay, I look disgusting. I have to do something about it, man. And then I
Right.
went through this whole transformation phase for almost 2, 3 years. I used to run every day, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers. I used to swim for an hour, go to gym. So ended up losing 25, 30 kilos, becoming
Wow.
much more fitter version of myself. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. But something very interesting happened during this period, Ashu. I became a
Right.
very active member of the community in the fitness, especially the
Interesting.
community in Bangalore.
Right.
People who run, people who do CrossFit, people who do strength conditioning, yoga, and all that. And that is where the kind of I started having the conversation around what are the consumables in the industry, what are
Right.
the problems people are facing, what are the opportunities. Of course, me being a long time entrepreneur, self-employed guy, there was always
Right.
a knack for finding the opportunity, and
Right.
that's how I slowly started kind of shifting from being a pure consulting tech guy to somebody who was actually willing to
Right.
build a brand in this space. So that's my story in a small
Super.
gist, Ashu.
And I think that's an exciting story, right? And I think honestly, you possibly one of those individuals, right, who took the call and and started what you did, right? There are a lot of people, right, who continue to experience these similar issues, right, but don't necessarily start out because of a variety of reasons, right? And I think it becomes possibly what will happen by the end of this conversation, right? It's going to also serve as a motivating story for many people who are going to be watching this, right? That enough of living the way they have, right, and it's time for them to go out and experiment, right, and live a dream, right, in many ways. With that, Ujjwal, you know uh, Zimrat, with Zimrat, you're in a very, very competitive category, right? What I want to understand, this conversation, I want to start this conversation by understanding how did that category happen. And I understand, you were part of the community, and within that community, you were doing what you were, right? The agenda and aim was very different, right? But when you move into a product play, right, it becomes a completely different ballgame, right? Tell me a little more about that journey, right? From identifying that gap into, say, getting into manufacturing, getting it to the consumer, right? Tell me a little more about that journey that you've had. Those initial days, right? How were they for you? Through the course of of buildings in that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ashu, right? And let me start off by saying one very simple thing. And I always want to start with this fact that Zymrat is a very special company. And, if I'm completely leaving my founder's bias aside for a moment, because every founder would say that. Right? But for me as a consumer also, it's a very special company because we are the first company in India. And I truly and strongly believe, not just because I'm saying this, but based on many reviews, thousands of reviews that we got across social media and websites, we are the first company in India which is truly competing with Nikes and Under Armours of the world in terms of quality of their product.
Right.
Now, Ashu, the fact is that, there are hundreds of brands on marketplaces like Myntra and Amazon. If you just to buy an Activewear t-shirt, all you have to do is just go on Myntra and, kind of search for a gym t-shirt or active t-shirt or running t-shirt, you'll get thousands of options. But, the funny thing, Ashu, is that if you and I were to go and ask 10 of our friends or relatives, what do they want to wear for their next workout, yoga or running session? 10 out of 10 times the answer is always Nike, or more recently Under Armour, or for those who have traveled the world, it is Lululemon. Now, there's no problem with this kind of brand following. We don't have any problem with this kind of brand following. But the fact is also that most of these brands come at a very, very hefty price tag in their showroom products.
Right.
So I'm not talking about the products which are being sold at EORS sales or in the brand factory outlets. I'm talking about the products which are available in the showroom, which people like us, despite having money in their pocket, the Indian middle class value kicks in when you walk into Nike or some international brand showroom and you come out disappointed because you cannot get your hands on the products because it's too expensive.
Right.
And there's one more very interesting part, Ashu, which most of the folks are not aware today. More than 50% products from these brands, or I would rather say more than 70% products from these brands, never see the face of India because, we as a country are not considered a primary sportswear performance wear market.
Right.
Now, this is exactly the kind of pain point, or this is exactly the problem that both Ankita, my co-founder, and I have faced on multiple occasions. And that's how we actually got to start Zymrat, figuring out why can't we do the same thing which some of the global brands are doing in India, outside India, wherever supply chain lies. But why can't we do it for ourselves and also for the rest of the Indians as a matter of fact, and sell it as a direct to consumer platform.
Right.
But of course, as you said, right, category was very clear for us. We wanted to get into, apparel and maybe slowly into footwear as well. But we wanted to start with apparel first. But the biggest problem, I would say, the biggest challenge for us was in terms of finding out the supply chain, right? So now, even if you just take some of the products from some of these international brands in your hands, Ashu, and if you get, let's say, products from a random XYZ brand in India, immediately, and we have done blind tests with people, immediately, and 100% of people always pick up the product which is lying on the other side from the global brand.
Right.
Now, the reason is that the material, the raw material, the threads, the feeling of the product is something which is very unique across these global brands because they are investing very, very heavily into research, R&D, into materials, raw materials, technology, which makes their products very unique to just touch and feel and put on your skin. And that is what kind of attracts us as Indians. And we as Indians love our cottons, right? We want the products to be very soft, a
Right.
very kind of pashmina, cashmere kind of feel, right? But if you just go on a, let's say, a big box retailer
Right.
shop, and if you just pick up a t-shirt for 500 bucks, which is claims to be a running t-shirt,
Right.
there's a synthetic feeling attached to it. So even
Mhm.
though Indians are buying that, people are not very, very fond of that. And that is why the
Right.
aspiration still lies with these bigger brands, because they are able to make these products which are amazing in touch and feel, but they are not able to provide it at an affordable price. Right.
Mhm.
So first problem or first challenge for us to crack was finding out whether this whole market exists or not. So we
Right.
ended up speaking with close to some 300 odd folks in and around Bangalore, because
Right.
both Ankit and I have been into our fitness journey for very long, and we are very well connected across the community also. So we ended up speaking some 300 odd folks directly in person. It went on for a while, this whole
Right.
exercise. And we realized that this is a problem. The whole touch and feel and the price problem is not just ours, but in the larger community as well. So then we started, kind of traveling across length and breadth of the country. So we have gone to, I mean, name a city which does garments in India, whether it's Tirupur, Ludhiana, Bhilwara in Rajasthan. We've been to every place. There was a
Right.
time, very funny story, there was a time when Ankita and I lived in the Ginger Hotel in Tirupur for straight 90 days, because we come from a
My
tech
God.
background.
Right.
Yeah, we come from a tech background. Ankita used to lead a quality team in Cerner Healthcare before she came on Zymrat.
Right.
So we both come from tech background, not fashion background. And we strongly believe that is our biggest moat, not being from fashion background. So to
Right.
learn about the industry, we lived in Tirupur straight for 90 days. But, and we learned a lot. We visited factories every single day. We met with many, people from across the industry. We learned a lot about the industry, how it works. But what we ended up realizing, Ashu, is that while we are doing some amazing stuff in cotton and some bamboo and some natural ingredients,
Right.
when it comes to performance wear,
Mhm.
something which bigger athletes, everyday athletes, people who go to gym, crossfitters, runners, for their specific requirements and for their specific needs, the raw material and the technology and the fabric and the threads which are available in our country are not as suitable as what's available in, let's say, some of the countries like US, Europe,
Interesting.
Taiwan. Yeah, right. So
Right.
then we started traveling across the world. So we have been to Sri Lanka multiple times. We have been to, of course, in our previous stints as tech individuals. We have also traveled to other parts of the world, like
Right.
UK, US, of course, Thailand, Taiwan, Philippines, many places. And then we started kind of collecting many samples, many raw materials, many examples from across the world of the materials. So this whole exercise, and you wouldn't believe it, actually, this whole exercise went on for almost 18 months before we even started making Zymrat. Because, of course, we were working on our own startups, our own jobs, whatever we were doing that
Right.
time. And we didn't want to make just a t-shirt for the sake of launching a brand. We knew from day one that we are not in the business of selling t-shirts, right? We are in the business of building an aspirational brand, and that can only happen if the product is absolutely, I would say, bonkers.
That's
So yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so that's how, I mean, we traveled the world and then better the world, and then we kind of spent, I would say, many months doing this, and then ended up kind of cracking the very, very difficult supply chain that lies in this performance industry.
Right.
And just to give you a little bit of insight, as of today, in the last 1 year, we have, on multiple occasions, we always share our supply chain, our quality team, our machinery with some of the best brands in the world. I mean, who's of the performance wear industry? I mean, you name the brand, and probably we and them have shared our resources at some point in time. So we have taken some time to kind of do this, crack this whole supply chain side of things, but we've done it well, and that's why I guess people absolutely love
Ujjwal,
it.
I have many questions, right, on that one, and I'm gonna come to them in just a bit, right? But I think just for reference, right? I think not a lot of people. I think while we consume a lot of fitness wear, and that entire sportswear category, right? While we consume from it day in day out, I am sure a lot of people who are going to listen to this conversation, right, would want to know what is the larger market size of this entire thing, right? I'd love you to give me a sense of that, right? What is India consuming as a market in this category, organized and unorganized?
Couple of years. So brands like Nike, brands like Adidas, even Decathlon, all these brands have been reporting revenues over and above 1,500 to 2,000 crore rupees per annum, in the last couple of years. And there's just 2-3 brands, right? A very well-known Indian brand, HRX on Myntra, has been reporting revenues in multiple of hundreds of crores in last couple of years, and I'm sure they would have probably reached four figures, 4,000 crores or something by now. So this itself, and here we're talking about only 4 or 5 brands, and there are many more brands, a huge organization unorganized sector out there, which is in this category, right? So the number suddenly, this $10 billion suddenly starts becoming believable. And that is, and out of that, I would say actually 40% of it is being reported from premium products, the products which are being sold in showrooms, especially in international brands. And that is exactly the segment we are going after. So of course, the lower end of the segment, which is where I would say Decathlon absolutely rule, sub 1,000 rupees categories in apparel, that is a separate market. But we are going after the market, which is, above 1,000, above 1,500, very premium products, very innovative technologies and all that.
Very interesting. Ujjwal, that brings you to a very interesting facet of this entire industry, right? India is an aspirational market, right? And I think that aspiration, I think COVID has been an accelerator, right? And COVID has accelerated the entire event of, us wanting to deal with, international brands, right? All the more. I see like a bunch of things, right? So I think one, we've been consuming a lot of content, right? And when you start looking at, say, a lot of international content, right? What you start to realize is that brands and certain brands, right, that possibly are your competitors, you're essentially playing in the same sort of zone, are extremely thick in those markets, right? There are not necessarily a lot of D2C brands. That's number one. And Indian consumer is consuming that, right? Second, what we've also started to see is that influencers, for example, right? And in this case, a lot of celebrities, right, are actually wearing, for example, the Gucci's of the world, right? And you will see them doing a lot of campaigns with Puma, with Adidas, right? Reebok, of course, has been a little off late, right? But I think it's been extremely active, right? Adidas again has been very, very active. They've come up with originals. They've signed up people like Ranveer Singh, right, to go out and sort of advocate for the brands, right? Now, what is happening is that the Indian consumer is essentially getting influenced by all of this, right? And today it's just become so much more easier for me to go onto an Amazon or a Flipkart or whatever, right? And just order, right? And there are some specialized sites like veg, non-veg, which have come up, right? Which are essentially advocating for a lot of these brands, right? So there's a huge cult-like play which is now kind of created, right? How difficult does that make your job in the entire scheme of things, right? Given this kind of almost exuberance, excitement which is there around some of these brands, right? And the community play, for example, which we started to see, right? If you look at, for example, the Nikes of the world, right? There are some of those pair of shoes which are actually selling it at an absolutely bizarre price, right? Which gives and builds that entire aspirational element, right? So while somebody could come in and consume a certain product at a commoditized price, eventually they are looking to graduate into that category, right? Where I can, go out and buy that 50,000 rupees, say, for example, a shoe, right? A running shoe, or a 20,000 or 25,000, right? Similarly, for say sportswear, right? For it's become so much more fashionable to carry that brand on what you're wearing, right? And that possibly also is is a reason of a growing unorganized market, right? Where people are buying, the first copies, right, of these products. What do you make out of this kind of, the entire content over supply and brands integration there, which, how difficult is that job? It makes your job in the process as a founder who's creating, a D2C brand in the activewear category.
So Ashu, I just want to cover, before we dive into the actual question of content and select-driven commerce. One thing I want to highlight, you mentioned 15,000 rupees ka shoe. I do own a 15,000 rupees ka shoe for a specific usage, which is, I do a lot of weightlifting. I love it. And that shoe works amazingly well. But every time I wear it, it also hurts it, because that shoe should not cost more than 5,000 rupees to me as an Indian, maybe. But it's just painful to see none of the Indian brands so far on marketplaces have been able to crack similar kind of product. And I hope that we will be able to do it someday. Right. Now, coming back to the actual question, it's a very right way to look at it, Ashu, that some of these bigger brands are very thick in their market, and they're using a lot of celebrity-driven, let's say, engagement marketing models. But for us, Ashu, from day one, there was one thing which was very clear. That products were going to be always our heroes, Right. So despite whether we have a actual, let's say, a hero, a real life hero in our brand or not, right, products will always shine. Because I'll tell you the truth, Ashu, and in you being a consumer, you would know, no matter how big of a celebrity I get on the brand, or how well a digital marketing campaign I run on the brand across the globe, if the product doesn't speak for yourself when you get it in your hand, you'll never come back to me, right? And as a D2C brand, it's very important for us to kind of go for that lifelong value of the customer. When we acquire, we want to make sure that they buy product again and again. So celebrities and, let's say, all these influencers will always something which is second priority for us. We always want to crack the product first. Right. But once we had done that, we also knew that we have to kind of get people talking about us, right? So now there are two ways to go about it, Ashu, right? One is, of course, you get a bigger celebrity on board, and that itself gets you a lot of eyeballs, right? But I'll tell you, and me being a consumer in this category personally, I've always kind of not gotten swayed by, let's say, some of these, very shiny advertisements or star kind of power in the product, because I need to
Right.
get to know what the science behind the product is and what the quality behind the product is. And
Right.
this was a feeling which I was seeing being resonated by many more audience or many more friends and community members across the vertical. Now, whether it's CrossFit, whether it's weightlifting, whether it's running, yoga, or just a Pilates, that everybody was into the same boat. While they could give a shot to a celeb endorsed product once, but ultimately they want to believe in the product.
Right.
So what we did, instead of kind of getting a bigger celebrity on board, and of course as a bootstrap startup in the beginning of the days, it was also difficult for us to kind of, let's say, get somebody very huge
Right.
by paying them tens of crores of rupees. So we chose the route of going to the community. And I'm going to give you a couple of numbers of interesting things that we have done, Ashu. So till date, in the last, whatever time we have spent in the market, we have worked with more than 200 odd small and big coaches and experts from across the community. Now we work with them in various forms. So, we of course ask them to try our products. We ask them to become our experts, right? So when they, even before the products go on the shelf, they try the products for almost a month and they kind of give us feedback in the in the back end to improve the products. And if
Right.
they like it, and if the product has already gone on the shelf, then we start doing workshops with them. So in the city of Bangalore alone, we have done more than 10 workshops. Of course, pre-COVID, COVID has disrupted some of these things.
Right.
But we did workshops with them. We get people to come and learn about, let's say, deadlift, yoga, handstand, things like that, or some marathon session where a guy can teach them how to warm up or cool down after a marathon. And then we also get the audience to experience these products firsthand. So in a category like ours, Ashu, when we are also saying that, okay, our t-shirts, our average selling price points are almost 1,500, 1,700 rupees. At
Right.
this price point, people do want to touch and feel the products as well. So instead of just kind of blindly chasing that, celeb-driven model or influencer-driven model, we took the route of the community. So we got these coaches and experts to talk about us, and that has kind of worked out really, really well for us. Having said that, of course,
Please go ahead.
go ahead. Yeah. Having said that, of course, we use some micro macro influences as well. But interesting thing is that we have not essentially spent money on this so far.
Right.
And we have always, our approach is that we go to the guy and we tell him, if only you like the product, then we want to work with you. If you do not like the product, then I mean, doesn't matter what you speak. It will not be from heart. So
Interesting.
That's how the approach has been.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Ujjwal, what do you do for the newer audience, right? I mean, I have a daughter, right? My daughter is 9, right? And and today she sees a bag, right? And she's like, this is a Gucci, and I want that. And I mean, and this
Wow.
is, and essentially and that's not just her, right? I think that's everybody, every other kid around her, right? What do you do about a segment like that, right? Which doesn't necessarily has an understanding or a benchmark to kind of buy a superior product, right? They don't have that barometer, right? Which is there, what's good, what's not good, right? They might just compromise on a few things because it's a certain brand. What do you do about that institutionalization that's coming into that mindset? And this is going to be a very big segment, right? This is going to be a segment which is going to have much higher disposable incomes, right? What do you do about an upcoming segment like that, right? Because as soon as you get to a certain category, right, which is say beyond 27, 28, 29, right, you become a little more functional, right? And you're very defined in terms of your purchase, right? But that's not really the case, with the 10-year-olds and beyond, right? I think they want best of everything and they want to buy it much faster. They want to have more and more of it. What do you do in an environment like that, right? Where their mindset is getting institutionalized, right? They want to buy those brands. What do you do? I mean, how do you solve for that? Is there a thought around that, or is this something that you'll possibly be tackling, in future, and that could possibly be related to, say, your round of fundings, right? Certain milestones that you set for yourselves. I'd love to understand your perspective on all of that.
No, that's an amazing way to look at that. And I think you also, with your question, clearly bifurcated the need and the demand of such activities across age groups. So, for example, our TG by and large has been people who are into serious fitness activities, or even mild fitness activities, but they are above certain age group, let's say 24, 25 and all that. Now, in this age group, as you mentioned, the functionality and technology becomes a very, very huge part of it. So just because we kind of make products that are very innovative, very technically advanced, like Super Silva, the ball cooling, yes, that's the real name of the product. We get people coming and buying those products just because the science is so advanced.
Right.
But interestingly enough, when you talk about people who are below that, let's say under 20, 18, 17, 16, or even 9 and 10, there's this whole strategy of influencer marketing, because they are the ones who are very, very heavily influenced or convinced by
Right.
the people they follow, or let's say some of the idols. But even in that, right? So even if we're not doing that actively right now, we're not
Mhm.
actively hiring celebrities or not
Right.
actively hiring the bigger influencers. But even once we start doing that, even then the strategy is very, very clear, Ashu. We're not going to
Right.
compromise on the ethics. And
Mhm.
ethics says that we cannot just pay you, 5 lakh rupees and ask you to just talk about the products, even if the product shit for itself, or if you, if you do not believe in the product personally. So even if you to kind of get into that segment where we are actively targeting the younger audience, 17, 18, 16, 15, or
Right.
even lesser. And if we were to bring some of these role models, we'll be looking at people who are very genuine, very authentic, have done some really good amount of value creation in the society in general, instead of kind of just, creating content for the sake of money. So that's
Right.
the kind of approach we have our mind set on.
Oh, interesting. Ujjwal, I have a very interesting question, right? And this was not supposedly to be this is something which has happened in the course of the conversation, right? What I would love to understand is essentially your process of innovating, right? I mean, something that you kind of alluded to a couple of times in the conversation, through the course of the conversation, right? I'd love to understand the innovation process for you, right? If, for example, I am a founder, right? And who's starting out, right, with limited means and ways, right, largely self-funded, right, before I get to a certain point where institutional capital starts coming into my business and stuff like that, right? Process of innovation can be very, very challenging, right? In your case, it could be all the more challenging because the kind of competition that you're dealing with is just in a very, very superior position, right? To go out, innovate something and then put in the marketing dollar to advocate for it, right? For an early stage business, for a new business, right, which is trying to sort of say build that category, is essentially against the tide, right? It's a very difficult piece. Tell me a little more about your innovation process, right? I mean, is this an innovation process that you've built as a integral part of the organization, or is this something that where you say that there are certain trends that are flying, there are larger brands that are doing certain well in certain categories, let's just go after that, right? Let's kill it at price, let's kill it at availability, let's kill it distribution, right? What's the mix like, right? I'd love to understand a little more. I know there are no clear answers for this, but I'd love to understand how do you approach the problem, because that approach possibly could be a learning lesson for many, many people
Right.
who are going to be seeing this.
Right, right. I'll try to answer it in the best possible,
Sure.
kind of format, so that people understand what we're talking about here. So before we get into the innovation cycle, Ashu, one thing I think which founders like us also have to be very clear about is that once we position the brand in a certain way, it's kind of super difficult to come back from that, right?
Right.
And that is why even in a direct to consumer category with physical products being in the picture, once we have kind of gone and said that, okay, we just make t-shirts, forget
Right.
about innovation, forget about science, we just make t-shirts that are being sold for $500, right?
Right.
Suddenly I cannot start selling another set of t-shirts for $2,000 in next
Correct.
6 months and start claiming that, okay, now I'm doing innovation.
Right.
Because consumers are, I would say, number one, very, very clingy, very
Right.
loyal to some of the brands. They're very
Right.
smart, very, very matured nowadays with all the content. So that has to be very clear. So let's say even if we are getting to create a category, we have to be very, very careful about what we start with. So we cannot start with a very average product. So it's I mean, I know I'm sounding a little bit conservative here, but it's not like a tech product, right? Because
Mhm.
on tech, there are a lot of
Right.
opportunities to innovate and constantly improve. I mean, look at
Absolutely.
Facebook and Instagram from day one to today, or so many beautiful Indian startups. In our case, so if we have already sold 10,000 t-shirts, which are very average in quality, it'll be difficult to come back from there if unless and until we build out a new brand, right? So I would say if the agenda is to build a brand with innovative products, with scientifically advanced products, it has to be done from day one. So the
Right.
first t-shirt or first shoe, or I don't know, first set of coffee, whatever your startup is about, is going out. It has to be at least at a certain level. Of course, the improvements are always going to happen, but that certain level has to be achieved from day one itself.
Right.
So that was something which was very clear for both Ankita and me, and that is why even during our pilot, which we did a very small pilot before we launched Zymrat,
Mhm.
even during our pilot, we made sure that the products are really great, really good, and we sold out in like less than 90 days. It was
Right.
very small number of pieces, but we sold out in 90 days. So that is one thing which is very clear. I guess should be very clear for all the founders, and very
Right.
clear for us in our minds. Now, how do we go about it, right? So we look at it in a very simple way, Ashu.
Mhm.
before we get to distribution, before we get to categories, or before we get to certain brands, we figure out what is the problem that we're solving, right? So, I mean, in very simple terms, for example, we have just launched a product like almost a couple of months ago, which is called Super Silver. Now, that Super Silver product is powered by sustainable silver iron. And just without taking too much time, just to dive a little bit of how it works. Right? So, historically, brands have used nano silver in their products to kind of fight bacteria and kill odor. But the problem with nano silver is that it leaches onto your inside your body through perspiration, or even to the water bodies during washes, which can hamper the environment and can kind of end up killing some aquatic lifestyle. Aquatic animals. Yeah. Now, what we did here was we worked with a technology partner to come up with a different mechanism of applying silver on the garment, which makes it non-leaching. So now it doesn't wash off in the water. It doesn't go into your body. It just stays in the garment. And then we have tested it across the lab, across hundreds of washes, 200s of washes, and the technology remains to the garment. So that is a problem kind of solving approach. And we knew that this is a problem of bacteria and odor, and irrespective of how hygienic of a human you are, right? And a lot of people get offended when we talk about it sometimes. They say, okay, I don't smell. It's not about whether you smell or not. If you are really, let's say, if you're taking a flight, if you go for a marathon and if you not go back home and you have to go to somewhere else till evening, there's a very high chance that you will start smelling, not because you are not hygienic, because bacteria starts producing on the garment, and garment has the tendency to hold on to the bacteria and start smelling. So the problem solving approach is how we look at it. And now similarly, we have another product called the ball cooling short. In that, we have used a technology of special knitting, 3D knitting, which allows the air to kind of flow around your skin and thereby allows you to kind of stay cool even during hot workouts. So problem solving approach is something which we very, very, I would say, strictly follow. And so for example, we are kind of planning to get into a very interesting, innovative category in the early next year, which will be around athleisure, home active, and all that stuff, right? Now, we being in the innovative brand, there's always an option to just make something which, let's say, jockeys of the world do. We are going to do that. Now, when we do it, we'll do it very interestingly. So there's going to be a proprietary technology attached to it. People like you and I will be able to wear to our office, go to a small run, maybe go to a gym, and also come back without smelling, without sweat, and all that. And that's all going to happen with natural fibers, like all these cottons, bamboos, and all that. So problem solving is where we kind of, I would say, look ourselves, and we being tech people, and that's why I said in the beginning, not being from the fashion background is our biggest moat. Because we don't know how to cut corners, man, honestly. We don't know how to cut corners to kind of save cost. We just know how to make it better. So I guess that's the approach. And then, of course, once we've got the product right, then we start looking at distribution, the positioning, the brands, and all that. And for us, it has largely been direct to consumer so far. We have not been on marketplaces.
Ujjawal, thank you for giving us that insight, right? I think that's just opened up so many other questions, right? And I want to understand from you, right? The first question that I want to understand is that, I mean, when you talk of this entire category, right, of activewear, of performance wear, right? What you're talking about is, and when you're getting the quantities done, right, by manufacturers, there's typically a requirement for doing very large quantities, right? Because that's when the unit, I mean, that's a basic requirement for many of these manufacturers, right? How do you manage that scale, right? I mean, how do you sort of manage those quantities, right? Given that you're still an early stage brand, you're still kind of picking up, right? There's still depth to be maintained. You're still prioritizing a lot of your customers, right? How do you sustain that innovation, right? And what you talked about is something that makes complete sense, right? But I'm finding it difficult to, when I'm thinking of the model, I'm finding it difficult to to get that balance, right, between doing it right in terms of quantities and the right cost to the consumer, right? How does that balance comes in?
Absolutely, and that's a great question, and I think that's a very industry-specific question, because there's a problem that I think everybody in their lifetime in this category, or I think any category, would have probably faced, because the minimum order quantities are the bane of this industry, and and if you look at it from suppliers' point of view, it's also right, because why would they make like 5 kilo of fabric or 5 kilo of garments, right? I mean, like you're not that special for them. But here's where I would say the inner businessmen, the inner visionaries have to come out. So, when we started our manufacturing process, we did some smaller pilot launches, before we actually got into the market. But even then, we went out and we sold out a very, very strong vision to our, to who were the manufacturing partners were
Right.
even during that time. And then we traveled length and width of the world, man. I mean,
Right.
we've been to places, Ashu, I'm not kidding. And supply chain till date in this category remains to be the toughest nut to crack, honestly,
Right.
especially with the kind of products we are making. Again,
Right.
making a cotton t-shirt in Tirupur is like 5-day job. Making a polyester t-shirt in Ludhiana is 7-day job. I mean,
Right.
all you have to do is go and release POs. But making the products which can compete, look into the eyes of Lululemons of the world, is something
Right.
which is a whole different ball game, right?
Absolutely.
So we traveled the length and width of the country and many other countries also to figure out who can make this for us. And then we sold them a lot of vision. And you know what? And it's going to sound very, very, I would say, weird here, but right then, and that was a time when, a lot of these Indian startups, Flipkart was, when we started,
Right.
of course, Flipkart was kind of getting acquired by Walmart and all that stuff.
Right.
So many success stories across the country, right? So people had started waking up to this Indian startup vision. You can also call us lucky, because we were actually able to sell to some of our manufacturing partners saying that,
Right.
guys, listen, this is the plan. India
Interesting.
doesn't have a category like this.
Right.
India doesn't. I mean, you sit down with a search on Google, I'll take you to market. India doesn't have this category in such high quality products. So we are going to break it, and we are promising you that, okay, for next 1 year, every garment that gets out of Zymrat headquarters, Zymrat warehouse is going to be made at your factory. So we kind of got into certain agreements, and of course, we also allowed them to take certain amount of leverage from us. So, for example, and that is why, when we talk about Zymrat at large, Ashu, to within the team, to investors, to anybody, we always tell that we spend at least 3 to 4 times more on our raw materials and technology than any other brand in India. And let's say a typical t-shirt in India gets made for 250 rupees.
Right.
We make a t-shirt for 550 bucks. Now, whether it's a surcharge that we are paying to this to our manufacturers, or whether it's a technology advancement that they're bringing into the brand, that's decision left to us. But we do not compromise on the raw materials and the cost. So certain leverage we had to give to the manufacturers, and certain vision we had to sell to them with certain guarantees. And that's how we were able to kind of, I would say, able to get lucky in cracking the supply chain.
Right.
But you are very right. The minimum order quantities and a supply chain, at least in this category at such high quality standards, remains the toughest nut to crack even till date for many brands out there.
I think the even tougher nut to sort of crack, or the more complicated problem is the consumer side of it, right? How have you been able to sort of balance it out, right? Because I mean, and if you're not, for example, as a consumer, if I'm not buying a Nike, if I'm not buying an Adidas, if I'm not buying, say, for example, a Puma, right, and then essentially looking at it a very commoditized thing. So for me, it becomes, what's the cost the next best product is available, right? And to position yourself as not a decaf brand, right, at a slightly more premium, which could be a little lesser than, say, the larger brands, I think it's an extremely difficult position to be in. How do you solve for that?
I'll give you a couple of very, kind of interesting numbers here, Ashu,
Sure.
and that will also, and then we'll dive into how we solve for it. So we, in the entire history of our business, we have always seen a repeat purchase of more than 35% every single month. We've never seen a repeat purchase which is less than 30%, and that is a number which is unheard of in this category.
Right.
And even with our, kind of risk cutting policies, like you can try the product for 10 days and then we'll take it back if you don't like the product.
Right.
We've seen less than 2% refunds, for many, many months, where people have been buying the products, getting the repeat purchase, without returning it back. Now, in order to kind of achieve this kind of, status, this kind of numbers and this kind of loyalty, I think it all has to start with a lot of education.
Right.
Now, unlike, let's say, some of the Western markets like US, Europe, where a lot of people are like us, take inspiration from looking at the businesses, amazing businesses out there. The education in India is twofold. So there, the consumers are already aware of what fitness is, and then now all they need to be done is sold the product.
Right.
Here we do it twofold, right? So here a lot of people are not even aware what kind of products they need to wear for certain, like marathon. Right. Somebody would go and start wearing cotton t-shirt, and then once their nipples start bleeding, they'll realize, okay, this is not the right product for me. Or they'll go and squat in a Bata shoe, and then they'll realize, okay, shit, my knees are hurting, because they don't know what. So for us, it starts with level 0, I would say. So where we start using our coaches, using our experts and some of our internal knowledge database to educate customers about fitness and health. And then we start educating about the products, right? Saying that, okay, and we have a very interesting magazine called the High Road Journal on our website. Do give a read when you find time. Amazing articles, great science back articles. So, and then we go and talk about products to the audience, saying that, okay, this is how our products are built. This is the kind of technology which is built into the products, and this is how it's going to support you into your lifestyle. Now, whether it's running, yoga, or CrossFit or weightlifting, or maybe even a morning walk. This is how it's going to support you into your lifestyle, and this is the reason why we command such price points. No, and no doubt about the fact that, Ashu, one of the biggest pushbacks we've gotten from consumers is on the price points, because you said what they look for is, if iske niche kya milega, what will I get just below this in the price point, and that's the first. But the most interesting part about this, Ashu, is once we are able to convince these people to try the products once, they have been the biggest ambassadors for Zymrat.
I can imagine.
The people who question the price points first, and then when we spoke to them over phone or on Instagram comments or email, and then got them to try the products, gave them assurance, if you don't like it, we'll take it back and all that. They turned out to be the biggest folks who still swear by Zymrat products day in and day out, for all their active lifestyle needs. So I guess, that's how we're looking at it, Ashu. I mean, in terms of price points, education, both content and products.
Interesting. I think, Ujjawal, one thing that stands out across this conversation, right, is the persistence with which you and Ankita have been dealing with this entire thing, right? And I can only imagine how competitive this space is. I mean, I know, the struggles of this industry, right? I mean, I understand textiles, I understand manufacturing a little, right? And it's a fairly difficult process, right? And I think you're making it sound so simple, right? But I think one thing that clearly stands out is persistence. And I would love to question you at a personal level, right, through the course of our conversation, right, around some of those aspects, right, which would possibly be a learning for many other founders, right? But before I do that, right, Ujjawal, what's the performance like, right? So where is Zymrat today, right? I mean, what are the number of shipments that you're doing, say on a weekly basis, monthly basis, right? What are the larger numbers that you can, the numbers that you can give out, right? What are those numbers like? I mean, what's you gave me a sense of repeats, right, which is phenomenal, right? At what interval are these repeats happening, right? If you could give me a sense of that, I think it would be very interesting.
Right. So I'll start off with few very basic numbers, right? So number one is our demand is always higher than our supply. Right. And I would say it's higher up to 4x, 5x, not just like 1x, 2x, right? So, and you will see on our website, there are many products which we kind of sell out very fast, and then we get abused by our lovely customers. And then, why can't you restock faster? But then we have to explain them that our supply chain is a little extensive with all technology and all that coming into picture. So we take time, but then our demand is always high. Number two, we have grown. Of course, COVID has been even though it's such a statistic thing to say, and it's been a life-changing event for many people, including you and me, many folks out there. For digital first brands like us, it's also been a driver, I would say, kind of given a tailwind to us, right, to kind of grow faster. So right after COVID, when first COVID hit, there was a period when we saw almost zero revenue, right? And I think all brands in apparel shoes saw that during April, May period. The moment we came back, we sold out every single product in the warehouse within 60 days. So it was like insane for us to see that. And then, of course, we kind of got back our supply chain on track. That was also hit due to COVID. Then we relaunched all the products. And then, during second wave also, in the last 6 to 8 months, we have almost grown, I would say, 7 to 8 times in our, the kind of orders we ship, the kind of revenues we see. Supply chain also, again, has been on a path of, I won't say recovery, but has been kind of on and off globally. Supply chain globally, where we deal, has been hit massively by COVID, but we have been able to get it back on track by and large. As of today, Ashu, we ship, a good amount of orders. I would say close to 3,000 to 4,000 orders on a monthly basis. And the growth has been there in a consistent terms. We have always and often been hit by our supply. That's why I said that demand has always been higher than supply, and we have been by and large able to mitigate these challenges in supply for us with the help of some of industry experts, some of the mentors that we have on board. And that's why we're super excited for the kind of growth that they want to see in the next 6 to 8 months, because now our warehouse, our inventories are on track. So now we're getting orders and we're able to ship very fast, we're able to refill it very fast. I gave you the numbers on repeat purchase, of course, and we see an average order value of around 2,200 to 2,500 rupees, which is kind of significantly above what you will see on a typical marketplace in a similar category. So that's the kind of numbers, and that's the kind of scale and the growth that we're dealing with, Ashu. If I missed anything, please let me know.
No, I think that was fantastic. Which I mean, honestly, I think numbers are, the way I look at it, I think numbers are essentially only a reflection of what you possibly are, right, or what you possibly could be, right. I think, I mean, there are many other questions, right. I would love to ask you, right, but I'm going to preserve those questions for our next conversation, right, which is going to be a lot more deep dive into, dissecting the space a little more, right. How do you solve for very specific problems, right? I'm gonna move into, in interest of time, I'm gonna move on to my next question, right. As well, you mentioned of COVID. You've actually walked into my next question, right? I think while of course it's changed how organizations react to situations, right? What it's also done is it's changed the consumer forever, right? We never saw this kind of a digital shift, right? I mean, I don't think we could have ever imagined this kind of a digital shift, right? How has the consumer behavior changed, right? What's your sense as a founder? What do you make out of this shift, right? And second, do you think once we get back to normal, which we are now, right? Do you think we're going to stick to this, or we're going to readjust to our old ways of doing things the way we did, right, and consuming the way we did? Do you think it's a permanent shift, right? Do you think we have a far more aware consumer, which is a massive opportunity for many D2C brands, because their honesty and their ability to communicate is not a trait, it's a necessity, right? What do you make out of this situation with the current consumer in a post-COVID world?
Very interesting, Ashwin. I have two kind of views on this,
Sure.
And one of the views I have developed very recently, and of course the larger view is that the shift is permanent for sure, right? I know in my family, my relatives, my sisters, brother-in-laws, my parents, who have kind of shifted from going to online shop, sorry, going to the nearby kirana store to get something, or a shopping mall, to doing it at the tip of the finger, and things have made the life a lot more easier.
Right.
People have there's so many apps, and people have kind of gotten used to buying online. So that shift is going to be permanent. But as a brand, I have a very, very interesting point of view around this also. Now, with the shift, right? So, whenever there's a tectonic shift in any kind of consumer behavior,
Right.
all the businesses follow suit. So, in the last 1.5 years, I guess, with so many brands, so many apps coming into play, a lot of offline businesses, which were traditionally often, also came online. And the
Right.
focus is there. Everybody wants to get online. Now, here is the interesting part. The moment we are seeing some of the life get back to normal in cities like Bangalore, Bombay, Delhi, even other cities, right? There is a desperation, or there's a pent up, I would say, not just demand, but feeling to go out and do things, right?
Right.
Now, whether it's eating out in a restaurant, whether it's going to watch a movie, whether it's going out in the park with the kids to play, or whatever the thing is, or even if it's about whether to go out and shop, that's something which is coming back very strongly. So we as a brand very strongly believe that this is the right time for people and brands like us to start showcasing some of our products offline as well. Now, totally depend, and offline, I would say, is a very different function of capital, because building online, and you would have heard from so many amazing people across this industry in D2C, that building brands online has been cheaper than kind of what it was traditionally for older brands, right? So of course, offline is a function of capital, but then there's always an opportunity for brands like us to do certain things. So, for example, pre-COVID, we used to do a lot of workshops in some of the gyms, in some of the studios, and even in stadiums with our coaches. So we plan to bring that back. We plan to bring that back early next year with aggression, where we kind of get people to come and try our products. Kind of try our products, touch and feel it, and even buy it out if they want to. So I think there's an opportunity over there, because everybody, while is focused on digital, if somebody manages to open a small experience center of even 100 square feet or 100 by 100 square feet, it's going to make a huge difference. If you can find a spot in an offline, let's say an MBO or an EBO, not EBO, of course, an MBO or a shopping mall center for like 2 days to showcase the products, it's going to leave a very, very long lasting impression. So I strongly believe, Ashu, that offline is not going to diminish. Is going to stay, is going to play a very key role. And I think you would notice in your circle also this behavior, that people are kind of keen on starting to kind of getting keen on going outside and doing things again. So yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's the kind of two views I have. So while the shift is going to remain there, people are also going to do some offline activities for sure.
I kind of agree with that as well. But I'll tell you what. Can I tell you something about myself, right? And I think this is something that I'm actually trying, and I'm seeing this across, as physical gets back to normal, right? As we go back to, the malls for shopping, right? Trying new things. I think what I've started to realize, I think, and this is a shift which is not just with me, but I think this is a shift which is across people, is that, it's just so much more convenient to order it at home, try it at home, pay an extra buck. And I think that's a tendency which is setting it, right? Now I want to, when I'm going to a mall, right, I'm just going out to just experience it, or possibly for food, right? I don't want to go through that entire journey of, getting into a trial room, trying, testing. I think that's not, I think that's something which there's a shift which is definitely happening there. And I think even when physically comes back, I think people will still enjoy ordering it at home. It's just become so much more convenient. I think logistics is kind of the way it's kind of aligned itself. Uh, to this expectation, the consumer expectation has been absolutely phenomenal, right? And I think e-commerce companies just fall for it. So my sense is, I think physical is going to be more experiential. It's going to be more touch and feel. But I think
Exactly.
digital is going to continue to grow. Is my sense of it, right? As a consumer, and
Exactly.
I just find it for me so much more convenient.
No, I think you're very much on the same. I mean, we are very much on the same page, Ashu. You're right. That's what I said. Like, it's going to be experiential. I mean, you want to go out to experience things. So that's why, like, watching movies or eating food is definitely one of the key things that many people are doing now already. But online shopping, kind of getting goods delivered to your home now.
Right.
Whether it's, if your chai is running out of ginger, you can get it delivered in Bangalore within the next
Right.
5 minutes. Honestly, right? So that, and or whether it's ordering a t-shirt for your next meeting in 48 hours. So this is something which is going to stay. And that's why even in I mean, even brands like us, the kind of growth that we have seen in the last few months and the kind of growth we are projecting is primarily because the shift has been very, very large. And the TG itself, I would say, kind of from just being limited to top 30 cities or 40 cities in India, it's kind of expanded suddenly. So in the
Yeah,
last
absolutely.
6 months, we have seen a good amount of percentage of orders coming from tier 2, tier 3 cities, from very remote areas in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Maharashtra,
Right.
Karnataka, everywhere. People even in remote areas who are aware of fitness and kind of want to go for a run, they're ordering products from our website without hesitation. So
Yeah, yeah,
definitely that
absolutely.
shift is going to be there.
Absolutely. And I think I'm so bullish on the entire idea of Bharat, right? I think which is absolutely phenomenal. I think content has done a lot of that, right? Uh, Ujjwal, I'm going to move on to the we're towards the end of the conversation, right? Tell me a little more about the team, right? I think what I sense through the course of our conversation is that you're extremely heavy on innovation, right? But you are extremely aware of what your consumer wants, right? Now that is a skill set. A lot of it is, of course, available, but a lot of this is not necessarily a lot of skill set which is available in quantity, right? What's been the mix of team, right? How have you been able to sort of go out and identify the right people who bring in that ethos value which is required to building a brand for tomorrow, right? Tell me a little more about that, the construct of the team. uh, I'm sure these are points and the economic takeaways that a lot of people will possibly imbibe, learn from, right, and implement in their own businesses, and possibly in their own decision making.
Right, right. Very interesting question, Ashu. And for us, especially for Ankita and me, having done the business for first one year, 1.5 year by ourselves from our house, using our
Right.
home as a warehouse and all that, and then kind of growing into a team, taking a warehouse, taking office has been a almost a surreal experience, I would say, of course. And in this, the biggest blessing that we have got or received is the team itself, which we have
Right.
right now. Right. So now, one of the key things that we always I mean, we have a book where, we kind of read together or give to everyone to read. One of the things which we have mentioned at multiple times, there is accountability beats talent 10 out of 10 times, right?
Right.
So no matter what kind of skill set you have, if you're accountable, sorry, if you're not accountable, probably that's not going to be handy. So now,
Interesting.
to be more specific to the company and the category that we are building, so the requirement and the needs and the wants of the consumers are very, very, I would say, imbibed into our own hearts. So especially Ankita and me being, very, very enthusiastic about fitness, going to gym or running or yoga every single day without fail. The needs and wants come from us. But then we have this extended team of people who design, who work on the products and the fabrics across the world, across, in our head office in India, in Bangalore, who innovate, who work with Ankita, leads the product by the way. work with her to kind of take the product to the next level. But
Right.
in all the equation, Ashu, we have product team, we have content team, we have marketing team, we have operations, warehouse, everything. But in all this, there's one thing which is common, which we look for everyone, which we look for
Right.
in everyone for hiring, and that is we say, guys, we are in a business where there's going to be a lot of pushback. There's going to be a lot of pushback from brands, from in terms of price points. There's a lot of pushbacks when somebody will say, come and say, "Arey yaar, 1700 mein to I'll buy Nike. Why should I buy you?"
Right.
There's going to be a lot of highs, as all the founders go through, and a lot of lows for the entire team also, because we get all these comments on Instagram. So all we need from team member and from us is to be bold. Right. Be just bold and go behind the kind of vision and a dream that we have created. And we want to, convince every single Indian to practice the right of making and consuming world-class products without burning a hole in the pocket. So we should not be looking at always, if I want this, I have to import from US. We will, whether we make it in US or whether we make it in India, that's a different story. But we should be able to consume it in India at our own choice, at our own prices. And for that, a lot of boldness has to be within a team. So I think kind of being fearless is something which we try to have in the team, whether it's in terms of talking to consumers, whether it's in terms of talking to the vendors, or whoever is the stakeholder in the company. So we try to be fearless and bold across the board.
Super. Oh, Ujjawal, what are the next 2 years like, right? I mean, you've been funded, right? What are the next 2 years like, right? Is there a next round happening? And you can choose to answer. You can choose to prioritize, right? I leave that to you completely. What are the aspirations, right? What are the next 2 years? I would have loved to ask you a 5-year question, but I think 5 years is cliche, right? I think 2 years is it, right? I think we are a different economy, right? With a very different kind of an appetite, right? What are the next 2 years like, right? Where do we see Zymrat in the next 2 years?
Right. So of course, in terms of funding part, of course, we have some of the best people in the country on board with us, and we are in the process of kind of getting more resources on the board for the company to kind of grow faster, to build a strong team. But because since we have not announced it yet out publicly, so I'll keep it everything within the company itself as of now. In terms of the vision where we see Zymrat in 2 years, right, Ashu? So the kind of positioning we have achieved is very interesting in India right now. So, and I'll give you a very interesting fact here. Till date, not a single customer has compared us to a brand which is found on, or any brand which is found on Myntra or Amazon. Every single time somebody has talked about us as a consumer, they have put us in the same line with, let's say, Nike or Under Armour or Lululemon. Right. Of course, we get a lot of feedback from customers on how to improve. We're not saying that we are already there, because they are much bigger companies, very mature. So, but in terms of comparison, purely whatever we have done, we always get compared with bigger boys, right? So one of the categories, so we have done a lot of interesting work in performance wear category. One of the categories which we feel is here to stay, is growing equally fast as a sub part of the performance wear, is the athleisure and the, let's say, home active or the everyday wear category. Now that category is something which, while there are players in the market and jockeys of the world being the kings in the category, there hasn't been any innovation, right? So, and to be very specific, if you wear if you wear your cotton t-shirt 10 times, start getting a damp smell, no matter how hygienic or how well you wash it. So there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of improvement pending, or I would say pent up in this athleisure home active category, which we are going to be innovating. So we are working with some of the proprietary blends on natural, like cotton, bamboo, and all that stuff, which we'll be revealing early next year. And that's going to open a whole new segment of customers, whole new competitive landscape for us. And other than that, of course, we have primarily been a men's brand so far. And being a 50% women founding team, that women is something which we dream of all the day, every day. So once we have done the, kind of crack the men's category properly, we would definitely want to enter into women segment as well in the next 2 years. These two things are something which we are working on as a stage.
Super. Ujjawal, my last question is actually two, right? This is the last leg of our conversation today. And these are more personal questions, right? These are more leadership questions, right? And I would love you to answer it in your way, the way you think about them, right? The way you dissect it in your head, the way you prioritize in your approach. right? One is consumer education, right? For D2C brands today, right, when you are actually building for a very large market, an aspirational market, right, which is an aware market as well, right? Uh, consumer education becomes very, very important, right? How do you see that? I think what are some of the most critical facets or points within the consumer education piece that you think are very important for a D2C brand in today's environment, right? How do you look at it, right? What's your metric of it in terms of putting point A, B, C, D, right? What are some of those things?
Right. And that's very interesting, Ashu, because that brings me to the point, to the fact that we as a brand, or any brands like us, we cannot expect to command the price that we want to command. I
Sure.
mean, we are not entitled to that. That's given, right? Consumers have so many options, so we cannot say, "Nee, we command this price. You have to give us 1,500 for a t-shirt." We have to actually talk about what happened in the back end. Now, when I say talk about what happened in the back end, I do not mean making a video of the factory workers working on the
Right.
factory. There's a very cliche thing which has been done over many, many years. But
Right.
I'm talking about much more deeper level of education, which starts with, as I said, actually talking about what your lifestyle is, what your, in our category, what your lifestyle is, what your
Right.
fitness aspirations are. Not everybody wants to lift weights. Not everybody wants to marathon. Some people are just, kind of regular active folks who maybe want to stretch a little, go for a walk and come back home, right? So talk about these kind of angles, get into the specifics. And we do this, and we have a very strong, I would say, constant feedback loop system built into the brand. We make sure that we speak to at least 50 to 100 odd folks through surveys, through phones, every single month, and get their feedback on the product, get their, learn about their fitness aspirations. Who are these folks who are trying our products? Who are these folks
Right.
who are repeatedly buying from us, right? So the education starts from here, where we actually learn, tell them about different kind of fitness aspirations, lifestyles, activities, and learn
Right.
about them also, and then educate them about products. So unless
Interesting.
and until, and very interestingly, Ashu, unless and we have this feeling embedded into our heart that we are not entitled to anything. So we are not entitled to price points. While we say that, okay, we compete with the international big boys, there's always going to be a guy who will just come and say, why should I buy from you? Why can't I
Right.
buy this Nike? So we have to sit down with that guy. We have to explain him why we make such products, why we command certain high price points. So that's the kind of I would say, as we in marketing terms we call it funnels. So that's the kind of thing we do. We create awareness about the brand, then we learn about them. We create awareness about the health and fitness through some of the ebooks that we have in the brand. Some of the we have very active email lists, so we talk to the consumers through our magazines, and then educate them about our products, what goes into the product, and then we kind of try to convert them into customers. So we
You know,
have 2 or 3 steps which we kind of strictly follow.
and my sense is, I think that's possibly your playbook that you would recommend to other founders as well, right? I think that this is essentially that you should sort of do. Ujjwal, last question, right? A more personal question, right? And this is, I would want you to answer at a generic level, right? Where a lot of people can possibly emulate this, right? Now, building a brand in a market like India can be frustrating because, while there is an aspiration, we are an extremely sensitive market, right? We are a very price point driven market, right? We're still not there where we're playing an extra dollar, right? I think we're getting into that zone, where they're going to be higher disposable incomes and all that, right? To being a founder in a market like that, right, where you have a lot of pressure on the consumer expectations, and you're competing with, a lot of large brands, right? And then, and like very typical of India, right, where we are, a socially very active country, right? There are a lot of personal pressures that a founder has to go through, right? And the process is slow, right? Before you get to that point of pace, momentum, right? Because by then you would have set your foundation, right? It's extremely frustrating for a founder. How do you see that? How does a founder maintain this balance? You've possibly been through that. I mean, you've done fairly well in your earlier venture, but it's still a process which could be very demanding, right? Which could be frustrating and monotonous. How do you maintain that balance, right? I would want that to be my last question for our conversation today. I take away from many people. How do you? I'd love to understand Ujjwal's, thesis and philosophy of cracking that one.
Right. And it's a very interesting. Thank you for asking that, Ashu. Number one. And I would take maybe a couple of extra minutes to answer this also,
Sure.
because you brought in a couple of very interesting points, and I will answer in two folds. One was when you say social pressure and all that, of being an entrepreneur, founder, and then the second was how do we, in a price sensitive market, kind of make a brand, right? So I'll take the social wala question first. And in that, so I've been abroad by single mothers. So,
Right.
I mean, and all my perseverance, all my strength, I think comes from my family, having seen how she
Right.
brought my, sister and me and all that, gave us education, all that stuff.
Right.
And there was never a pressure on us, on me, to kind of do things a certain way, like how you have.
Right.
I know, and I being in my mid 30s, right? So you can imagine, ideally I should have a car or a house or a kid and all that. Probably should have gone through arranged marriage. And by the way, I mean, the flavor of the season is that, D2C couples, of course, Ankita and I am married also. I'm not sure if that was clear already or not. So Ankita and I started the company first, and then we kind of ended up marrying also, because Zymrat was all that we spoke about.
Right.
So I've been through that entire non-conventional process all my life, kind of
Right.
quitting the job in very early 2 years of my, full-time opportunity, and then starting up and just struggling massively without salary for many months, and then starting consulting, all that. So I think family support plays a huge role. If your parents are supportive,
Right.
if your ecosystem that you built around you is supportive, you can actually continue on the journey and kind of end up building what you want to build. Otherwise, it can get extremely difficult. If there's a pressure from the family, there's a pressure from the ecosystem to kind of meet certain standards or play by the book. It
Right.
can get very frustrating, and I can understand that. So I would say I've been very lucky in that sense. My family has been very supportive for me to kind of choose a lot of unconventional paths on this journey. Now, coming back to the question of building the brand in a price sensitive market, right? Very simple, Ashu, and I think this is why we have been kind of doing what we're doing, kind of staying true to ourselves. So we'll not sell anything which we don't consume ourselves.
Right.
So ever since Zymrat happened, there has not been a single day when I've not worn a Zymrat product in the gym. I go to gym very often.
Right.
There's not been a single day when I've not worn a Zymrat product in the gym. It's tested by me. All the stress testing, apart from some of the
Right.
coaches, is done by me, right? So let's say if I come to a point where, suddenly I dream of selling a t-shirt for 5,000 rupees, my first question to me would be, will I buy that?
Right.
If I will not buy 5,000 rupees of t-shirt, I cannot sell it.
Right.
And the same philosophy is something which we try to imbibe into the company. If we, even in terms of customer service, right? So we try to be very maniacal about it. We do give them, risk-free trial and all that. But we just treat them how we would like to be treated. So that's the philosophy of kind of being true to ourselves, is how we believe we'll be able to build a very strong brand in a price sensitive market. Because we, as founders, Ankita and I, both of us have been abroad in the country. We have lived in different parts of the country.
Right.
Coming from middle class families, having the middle class values, despite the amount of money we have in our pockets, there's always this middle class value which will kick us, kick in and say that, okay, if the burger is costing $500, probably I'll go for something else. Or if the t-shirt is costing 5,000 rupees, I'll go for something else. Having said that, we do invest, again, the thing is that it's all about the product sometimes do command the price. For example, certain shoes which are being made by some of the international brands, I do invest in them, and I've seen some of my team members invest in them as well. Ankita invests in them because they are so good for certain specific activities, and unfortunately, none of the brands in India are doing that.
Right.
So there are always products for which people would choose to invest money, but being true to ourselves in terms of price points and the quality is something which is going to play a key role for us in order to build a brand in the price sensitive market.
Right. Ujjawal, thank you so much for an absolutely fantastic conversation. I thoroughly love this conversation. I think one thing which kind of stands out, right? And I understand the challenges, and I think you kind of abstained, of talking about those challenges beyond a certain point, right? And I think your answer possibly to me is persistence, right? That you have to be at it, right? You have to keep working at it. It will eventually play out, of course, intelligently, right? You have to understand your consumer. There are many such points that you've highlighted through the course of the conversation that are absolutely stand out as well. I mean, I have gained so much, right, in this conversation, right? It just helps one bring in a lot of clarity in the process. I'm sure this is something that is gonna be observed and absorbed by many other founders who are going to be watching this, right? Thank you so much for taking the time. It was a pleasure to have you with us. I genuinely enjoyed this conversation. I look forward to having you with us much sooner. Where we about the very specific aspects, right, of how you're solving for the Indian consumer, right? But thank you so much. It was a lovely conversation. Loved every bit of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashu. Thanks for having me here, man. I mean, absolutely enjoyed it and quite a big opportunity for us being here.
Super.